Today, as many as 17,500 people who are held in bondage are illegally brought into our country every year. And it is estimated that there are more than 43,000 slaves in the United States at any given time. Even worse, there are as many as 27 million slaves globally. In the United States, only about 2% of those who are held in bondage are eventually rescued. I find that number appalling, but it is a higher percentage than in other countries. Many of the rescues here come through tips that neighbors give to their local police departments. A neighbor has a feeling something is not quite right next door, and after long deliberation, they finally call. But in Cairo, there was no nosy neighbor, and no one called. No one knew I was there, because the estate these people lived on was huge, and the mansion was far away from other houses. A few days, or maybe a week, after my mother left me in the home of these strangers, my new cruel reality began to dawn on me on a deeper level. That I was not going home. Ever. I became hysterical and insisted that someone call my mother and tell her to come pick me up. That was difficult for several reasons. First, my family did not have a telephone. Second, my captors, as I came to think of the man and his wife, were not about to call my mother. Instead, I pleaded with and enlisted the help of some of the other people who worked in the house. There were several, all adults, who worked and lived in the household in various capacities, and they were kind to me. It took some time, but eventually I found my mother on the other end of the phone line. I was so happy to hear her voice that I was probably incoherent. But the tone of her voice shattered me. "You are good. You do good for our family. You must stay there," she said. "If you do not, bad things will happen to you." I could barely breathe. My mother had truly abandoned me. Didn't she want me? How had this happened? What had I done to deserve this? Of course the answer was nothing. I had done nothing but be a happy young girl who loved her family. I found that for me, the old saying, "Bad things sometimes happen to good people," was true. When I hung up the phone, I turned around and looked at my co-workers in dismay. This life of slavery, of bondage, was going to be my life. Forever. I crumbled to the floor and sobbed. It turned out that I was not held in bondage forever, although every day I was a slave was a day too many. I was one of the lucky ones. I was one of the fortunate 2%. I was rescued, but that wouldn't happen for a number of years. First, I had many tears to shed. I had to find inner resources that I didn't know existed, and I would have to travel halfway around the world before the freedom I longed for was mine.